The night the temperature in Minneapolis dropped to -35 degrees, the city's emergency shelters ran out of cots before midnight. Paramedics were pulling frozen bodies off park benches. The mayor went on television and told people to stay inside. And somewhere on the edge of that city, in a patch of woods most people drove past without ever looking at, a 53-year-old black man named Marcus was sitting in 68 degrees of warmth. No furnace, no electricity, no insulation from a hardware store. Just earth, debris, geometry, and a knowledge system that modern civilization decided it no longer needed. What Marcus built that winter, he called the Fool's Shelter. Not because it was foolish, because only a fool, he said, would sleep outside in that cold when the answer was right there in the ground beneath his feet. Let me tell you how he ended up there first, because that matters. Marcus had been unhoused for 3 winters by the time that cold snap hit. He was not a stranger to the shelter system. He had used it. He knew its rhythms, its rules, its humiliations. Sign in by 6 or lose your bed. No re-entry after 10. Wake up at 5:30, whether you slept or not. And on the worst nights, the nights when the temperature went polar and every desperate person in the city converged on the same building, you would arrive at 6 and find the line already snaking around the block, with a staff member at the door telling you they were at capacity. Sorry, try the church on 7th. The church on 7th was full too. Marcus had learned something in those first 2 winters that the city's homeless services coordinators apparently had not. The shelters were built for average nights. They had no reserve capacity for the extreme ones, and the extreme ones were the nights people died. So Marcus started thinking about the problem differently, not as a policy problem, not as a funding problem, as an engineering problem. He had worked construction for 19 years before his life unraveled, framing houses, pouring foundations, installing insulation. He understood how heat moved. He understood that a wall was not just a wall. It was a system designed to impede the transfer of energy from one side to the other. He understood R values and thermal bridging and the difference between conductive heat loss and convective heat loss. And one afternoon, sitting in the public library reading about Inuit architecture, because the library was warm and free and nobody bothered him if he was reading, he had the thought that changed everything. He thought, if people living in the Arctic built shelters out of frozen water and stayed alive in temperatures colder than this, what exactly was the principle? And more importantly, could he replicate it with what he had access to? Here's where it gets remarkable. Before we go further, drop a comment right now. Have you ever been in a situation where you were forced to improvise, forced to build something or figure something out from scratch, and the solution turned out to be better than anything you could have bought? Tell your story, because what you are about to discover will change how you see warmth, shelter, and the intelligence we have been quietly discarding for the last 100 years. Let's talk about what modern cold weather homelessness response actually looks like, because the contrast is important. When a polar vortex hits an American city today, the response follows a script. Emergency warming centers open in church basements and community centers. Cots get unfolded. Volunteers hand out Mylar emergency blankets, those thin, crackling silver sheets that feel warm for about 40 minutes before your body heat depletes whatever insulation they provide, and you are lying there shivering inside what amounts to a very expensive piece of aluminum foil. Organizations deploy vans to distribute hand warmers that last 6 hours. Mayors issue cold weather alerts. And every single one of these responses is reactive, temporary, and dependent on infrastructure that can fail. Power goes out, vans break down, volunteers do not show, buildings fill up. The Mylar blanket is a perfect symbol of the modern approach. It looks like technology. It feels like a solution. It is manufactured in a facility, shipped in a box, distributed by a nonprofit, and disposed of the next morning. It addresses the symptom, one person, one night, not dying, and it does that reasonably well. What it does not do is address the underlying physics of the problem. A human body generates heat constantly, roughly 100 watts of it, and in extreme cold, the challenge is simply keeping that heat from escaping faster than the body produces it. That is the whole problem. A mylar blanket tries to solve this by reflecting radiant heat back toward the body. It does almost nothing about convective loss, the heat stolen by moving air, or conductive loss through contact with frozen ground. It treats one mechanism out of three and calls it a solution. Marcus, sitting in that library reading about people who had solved all three mechanisms simultaneously using nothing but compacted snow and animal skins, found this infuriating. Here is the part that should make you angry. The knowledge of how to build a shelter that genuinely, physically, thermally solves the problem of extreme cold has existed for thousands of years. It is not hidden. It is not secret. It is in textbooks. It is in anthropology journals. It is in the oral traditions of indigenous peoples across the Arctic who refined this science over generations with a precision that modern engineers still find impressive. And yet, when we talk about homelessness and cold weather, none of that knowledge is in the conversation. None of it. We talk about funding and beds and warming centers and mylar blankets, and the actual insulation, the thing that keeps human beings alive, gets discussed nowhere. The failure is not Marcus's. The failure is not yours. The system decided that ancient knowledge about thermal management was primitive and irrelevant, handed everyone a silver blanket, and called it progress. Now let's get into what Marcus actually built, because this is where it stops being a story about homelessness and becomes a story about engineering that will genuinely change how you think about warmth. Layer 1, location and earth geometry. Marcus did not build on flat ground. That was the first and most important decision. He found a hillside, a gentle slope in a wooded area, nothing dramatic, maybe 15 degrees of incline, and he dug into it. This matters because of something most people do not know. Below the frost line, typically 3 to 4 feet down in the upper Midwest, the ground maintains a constant temperature of around 50 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of what the air above is doing. The air above could be minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit, while 3 feet below the surface, it stayed at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The Earth itself is a thermal battery, charged by summer heat and slow to release it. Marcus was borrowing from that battery. By digging into the hillside rather than building on top of the ground, he accomplished 3 things at once. He reduced his exposure to wind on 3 sides to 0. He gained immediate ground contact with 50-degree earth on the back and side walls. And he gave himself a foundation that did not require any construction materials at all. The hillside was the wall. Think of it like this. Instead of building a box and trying to keep it warm, he was inserting himself into a thermal envelope that already existed. He was working with physics rather than against it. Modern emergency shelters do none of this. They are placed on flat, paved surfaces in urban areas because that is where the people are. They are exposed on all sides. They sit on a concrete that conducts cold upward directly into the cot and into the body. The Earth's free thermal energy, 50 degrees at arm's reach below the surface, is completely ignored. Layer 2, insulation and the debris principle. Here's where Marcus's construction work background became invaluable. He knew that insulation doesn't create heat. It resists the transfer of heat. And the resistance depends on 2 variables: the thickness of the insulating material and its ability to trap still air. Moving air is the enemy. Still air in tiny pockets captured and held is one of the best insulators nature has ever produced. Modern fiberglass insulation, the pink stuff in your walls, works by trapping air in its fibers. It costs money. It requires a factory to produce it. It requires a building supply store to distribute it. Dead leaves, Dry pine needles and dry grass do the same thing. They trap still air in the same way for free in enormous quantities. 3 feet of dry leaf debris has an insulating value roughly comparable to a well-insulated modern wall. Survivalists who have tested this in controlled conditions have recorded temperature differentials of 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit across well-constructed debris walls. Marcus wasn't working from a manual. He was working from physics, and physics doesn't care whether you read about it in a textbook or figured it out by necessity. He packed his debris walls 2 feet thick. He layered the roof with 3 feet of material because heat rises and the roof is where you lose the most. He made his entrance face downhill, a detail that matters more than almost anything else in the design, because cold air is heavier than warm air and will flow downward and out rather than pooling in the sleeping area. The Inuit had understood this for centuries. The entrance tunnel to a traditional igloo descends below the floor level of the sleeping platform for exactly this reason. Cold air sinks. You build the door at the bottom of the cold air trap, so the cold air has nowhere to go but out. This isn't magic, it's fluid dynamics. Think of it like a bathtub drain. The cold air drains away through the low entrance rather than filling the space where you're sleeping. Layer 3, the heat source and vapor management. A resting human body generates approximately 100 watts of heat continuously. In a small, well-insulated space, Marcus's shelter was body-tight, roughly the volume of a large sleeping bag. 100 watts is significant. 100 watts is a decent space heater, but Marcus added one more element, a small oil lamp. Nothing elaborate. A tin can, some cooking oil, a wick made from braided cotton cord. This type of lamp produces roughly 80 watts of steady heat. Together, Marcus and his lamp were generating close to 200 watts in a space about the size of a walk-in closet. 200 watts in a well-insulated, partially earth-sheltered space at minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit outside. The math works. The Inuit reached temperatures inside their igloos that historical accounts consistently place between 50 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, with exterior temperatures at minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit and below. Some accounts describe needing to open a ventilation hole to cool down. With body heat plus a kulik, the traditional Inuit oil lamp that works on the same principle as Marcus's tin can, they produced more heat than the shelter could shed. That's the target. That's the engineering goal, not don't freeze. Warm enough to take off your coat. Vapor management is the piece most people miss, and the piece that kills improvised shelters. Human breathing produces enormous amounts of moisture, roughly 1 liter of water vapor per night. In a tightly sealed space, that moisture condenses on the coldest surface, which is the inside of the insulation. Wet debris loses most of its insulating value. Wet sleeping materials steal heat from the body. Ice forms. The whole system degrades. Marcus handled this the way Inuit builders handled it, with a small, constant ventilation gap at the top of the shelter. Just enough airflow to carry moisture out, not enough to allow significant convective heat loss. The balance is narrow but findable. Fog accumulating near the entrance? Close the gap slightly. Condensation on the walls? Open it. This is active management, not passive comfort. Marcus paid attention to his shelter the way a sailor pays attention to wind and sail. Constantly. Deliberately. So why don't we know any of this? Why isn't this knowledge in every survival class, every homeless services training, every emergency preparedness program? Why did we trade it away? 3 reasons. They work together. Speed. The debris hut Marcus built took him 3 full days to construct properly. You cannot deploy 3-day construction projects in an emergency response. A warming center can be opened in 4 hours. The modern system optimizes for speed of deployment, and ancient thermal knowledge, which requires time, local material gathering, and site-specific adaptation, does not fit that timeline. Cost. You cannot commodify earth and dead leaves. There is no margin in teaching someone to dig into a hillside and pack it with debris. The warming center, the mylar blanket, the hand warmer, these items can all be manufactured, purchased, distributed, and billed for. The fool's shelter cannot. An industry cannot be built around it, and so it receives no funding, no research, no promotion. A new technology made it seem unnecessary. Central heating arrived in American cities at the turn of the 20th century. Within 2 generations, the knowledge of how to stay warm without it had essentially vanished from mainstream culture. Why learn to build a debris hut when you could turn a dial? The answer: that systems fail, power goes out, and the people at the bottom of every social hierarchy are always the last to be protected when they do, was not a question anyone in a position to preserve that knowledge was asking. The hidden cost arrived precisely when the old knowledge was abandoned. People who fall through the cracks of the modern system, the people who arrive at the warming center at 6:01 and find the door already closed, have no fallback. They were never given one. The knowledge was traded away for a supply chain, and nobody told them. Here's what you can do with this, and I mean right now, practically regardless of your situation. The easiest option: look up debris hut construction online, not as a curiosity, as a skill. Watch the videos that document field tests in winter conditions. Understand the principles: earth contact, insulation thickness, cold trap entrances, vapor management. This knowledge is free. It belongs to every human being who has ever been cold, and knowing it changes how you see every emergency you might ever face. The intermediate option, if you have any outdoor space, a yard, access to a park, a wooded area, build a small practice debris shelter in autumn before winter hits. Build it when you don't need it. Test it. Sleep in it one night when the temperature is merely uncomfortable rather than dangerous. Feel what 3 feet of dead leaves actually does. Your body will understand it in a way no amount of reading will replicate. The minimum option: know your ground. Wherever you live, research the frost line depth and the stable ground temperature below it in your region. Understand that 50 degrees is waiting under your feet right now. In an extended power outage, in a vehicle breakdown in a remote area, in any scenario where infrastructure fails and you are left with only what the earth provides, that knowledge could be the most important thing you have. Marcus wasn't a fool. He was an engineer who had been stripped of everything except his understanding of how the physical world works, and he used that understanding to solve a problem that billions of dollars of modern social infrastructure could not. He read the same library books that are available to every person in every city in this country, found the same physics that Inuit builders encoded into their architecture thousands of years ago, and built something that worked when everything else was full. The knowledge wasn't lost. It was abandoned, traded for supply chains and convenience, for a system that works beautifully until it doesn't, and then leaves the most vulnerable people with nothing but a silver blanket and an apology. We are not going to let that stand. This channel exists to dig up exactly this kind of knowledge: the thermal science, the construction principles, the survival engineering that the modern world stepped over on its way to selling you another product. If this changed how you see warmth, shelter, or the intelligence hiding in plain sight all around us, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. And tell us in the comments, what do you want us to investigate next?